Hi guys, and welcome to the platform. And yes, man, we're just on our journey to just discover African spirituality and talk to leaders in the space. And today, my guest is Tataiso Mafora-Malakalaka. I hope I didn't butcher your surname. I was a bit nervous about the last one. How are you?
Firstly, you didn't butcher it. Perfect. And I'm great, thanks. And how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for your time. It's not every day that we see, young leaders uh, in church, or at least in my world. you know, um, you're a young leader in church. But before we get to that, can you just, briefly just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about, your upbringing?
All right. Tataiso Mafora-Malakalaka is the firstborn daughter of Tsepiso Dihuzo and Sibongile Sidu. So I grew up my mom was a single parent. And for a long time, it was just me and my mom. My mom was very influential to the woman that I am today. For me to even find it normal to be a female leader, I think it's because of that upbringing. You know, when your mother is your everything,
Mm,
she's the head of the home.
yeah, yeah.
You know, it that way. So society, I've always grown up with a feministic thinking, not necessarily because of anything political or psychological or whatever as a school of thought, but just because of my worldview, because of my upbringing.
Mm,
And my mom, because she had me quite young, I think as you realize that my mom's surname and my dad's surname do not do not correlate. My mom is Dihuto and my dad is Sidu. So they
mm,
had me when they were quite young in high school.
mm,
And my father was able to proceed to UCT to do his degree. And my mom had to stay for a year taking care of a baby. But after that, she did night school, got her matric, and also was able to make it to UCT. You know, back in those days, UCT was like, hey, the Harvard of South Africa.
remember,
So,
yeah.
yeah, it was a big achievement. So, I know my mom is an academic as well, but my formative years, I actually spent them with my grandparents. So
Mm,
now I'm talking about the spiritual formation of Tataiso. My grandmother and my grandfather were both literature evangelists. So you understand that we had all the children's books in the house, and every evening we would have Bible story time with my grandfather was, yeah, the that you know when they say an Adventist home,
mm,
with my grandparents, I was definitely the cliche where every night at 7 o'clock we have a family worship, and then they'll have the lesson study, but they'll also have a storybook for little Tataiso. And I was the only grandchild staying with my grandparents at that time. And they would teach all like state of the death, state of
mm,
the dead, and etc. through Bible stories. I remember
mm,
my grandmother and people who have observed said I used to ask questions like, "Will puppies make it to heaven?" and stuff like that. So
mm,
theological discussions were a thing from my 2-year-old baby self, and
mm,
so it's always been that thing. And even when we grew up, my grandfather, when we do lesson study, when we're old enough to read, he would say,
mm,
"You read." And then after, tell us what you understand from that. So my
mm,
spiritual formation, I give it all to my grandparents. And my worldview, later on, I did grow up. I was like 3, 4, and I needed to go to UCT. So my mom was
mm,
studying, and she would stay with me at Res, for example. And that's when
mm,
I could see that, all right, women are working. Hey, women are studying. Hey, women are
mm,
driving. So
mm.
yeah, so that's my background. That's my worldview. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered or given you a glimpse that you need, or you need more. You will tell me.
No, no, no. Like you answered that question very well. Which brings me now to my next question, which is like, obviously, your background being in a family, first of all, that embraces education. And, that is like, from a young age, you were taught, to be a critical thinker about, religion and all that. But, we see in the Bible, not just in the Bible, like in religion, as broad as it is, that, women are not encouraged to be leaders, in church. You can look at like a lot of the various beliefs. So what made you, decide that, what, I know you touched a bit on it, that your grandfather obviously encouraged you, but what made you decide that, what, I'm actually you want to preach to the world as a woman, as a young woman?
All right. So we've always been active in the church, I think because of my grandfather, we do Sabbath school, etc. So how I got to theology specifically, so initially I'm just saying my worldview, even with all of those scriptures and etc., nothing for me still made me think that it was impossible. No, like honestly, nothing. I'm really saying it, the same way as people who are brought up with that thing, yoguti, umfazi kumele. They are like that because it's also a nurture kind of thing. They were nurtured that way. And I wasn't nurtured that way. Even with my conversations with God, I mean, I'd read Ellen White books. I knew that Ellen White was a spiritual leader in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So I didn't find it far-fetched to begin with. Number two, when I did study theology, that's how I started. So I've always been active in the church. And so I got to theology. It was actually a Jonah experience. I really got to the idea of studying theology due to, okay, so my friends always used to tell me that, you need to be a psychologist. You're very people-centered and etc. You're always praying for our struggles, etc., etc. So I always wanted to be a counselor, but I wanted to be a Christian counselor. And then I would be in church and I would hear, especially theology students, the student pastors, when they come back from home, Bible, the same Bible that we are reading, but now they can take a text and sound so cooler than what we're getting. And I must say, even with, I would have study time, but I would also have time to study the Bible. Like I've always been that way, I think because of how my upbringing. So I always used to study the Bible for myself, even in my youth. I was just that girl, hey? So I always used to be annoyed that, no man, this background that you are bringing, where do you get it from? Why don't I have it? And when I did choose counseling, then I was like, okay, I get psychology as a school of thought, but I know that a lot, for you to get to problem solving, a lot of it is humanistically based. You need to get that solution. And because I was very grounded in my spirituality, I believe that somehow we also need to put God into the equation. And I felt that I would create this thing of studying theology and then doing psychology after, and then merging it into my own hybrid of ministry. So, but I was still looking at it from a Christian counselor, psychology. Yeah, so then I was like, I'm starting with theology. I'm still young. I'm starting with theology. And I got to Heidelberg. On day one, everyone was like, oh, you're studying theology. You want to be a pastor? My answer every time was like, no, I want to be a Christian counselor. So I did theology, and things went well. Yeah, things went well academically. I was just meant for it. Like I was just meant for it. I was an A student, Dean's List, graduated cum laude. Because yeah, it was just my things. And at the end, people were like, what are you gonna do now? And I got an interview that I went there not wanting to go. There was the whole Alberton versus TOC split. And I didn't want to be part of the drama because for me, it was just not what I wanted to. I don't want to start ministry and have to be fighting battles that I didn't even begin in the first place. Just speaking my honest truth. So I remember I was persuaded by, and they were just like, just go. Like, this is the process. When you graduate, this is what you need to do. And I got the interview. I got the job. And I guess I realized motseleng gore, my version of Christian psychologist or counselor was actually just being a lady pastor. And this is where we are now. Yeah, I do more counseling than anything. Besides the pulpit, every time we get that call, Muruti, ing, ing, ing. So I ended up doing what, okay, I had another definition for it, but God actually led me into my call. Yeah. Yeah.
So you ended up actually doing, what you've always wanted to do, but doing more, you know. Yeah. But at the end, you still were able to reach your goals, and you are basically living your dream and what you intended on doing. So, obviously being in that position where a lot of young people come to you, for, psychological help or social issues, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, what are some of the challenges that you think, like, young people that you are exposed to or that you talk to are challenged with, number one, and how do you think that, society can heal those problems?
All right. So firstly, um, it depends on which geographical area are you placed. So, for example, when I was in the outskirts, in the rural areas, you get socio-economic problems mostly. The fact that finances are not doing well at home. I got a job, but it expects me to, and I haven't had a job for this long time, but I'm expected to work on the Sabbath, stuff like that. And it's like, hey, and it's messing up with my pocket, and I'm the only one working at home. When you move to the city, and I'm currently in the city, however, the only disadvantage with me right now is that I work best with interpersonal relationships, and right now I'm on an administrative role, so I don't meet one-on-ones as often. But from my observation with the city life, I see our youth have a tension between wanting to trend, wanting to live the lifestyle that is portrayed on our Instagram, on our social media. You are a church clerk, but you want to go to IEP, you want to have your hobby, etc., etc. And some of that, we still get it in the rural areas, but the poverty is more. So you can't even worry about those luxuries of sipping your wines and your champagnes. So I think, so yes, with the city, it's that our Adventist background of health and temperance and being a set apart generation, and then where the new generation is like, I'd like to have a bit of both. Can I love my God, but can I also sip my champagne and not be made to feel judged? So that's the balance. That's the balance that the city people are trying to reach equilibrium with. And then so, and then I answered one part of your question. What was the second part again?
How do we address those issues?
How do we address those issues? Okay, with the okay, I'm supposing now, because I brought two scenarios, I'm going to have to come with.
You can start with the the rural communities.
With the rural communities, hey, I must say, this is unemployment is not only a rural area problem, it's also a city problem. From a pastor's perspective, hey, we do the best that we can. Sometimes religious methods do help. We pray and we say, okay, you have 10 interviews, and we pray that God opens one of those doors. And sometimes I do get those, what you call that, I get those testimonies that, hey, Muruti, we prayed, and oh my word, the Lord has come through. I never underestimate the power of prayer. However, number two is that we encourage our youth to also be industrious. I know of a friend who has started for example, her own company of women head covering for in the evening, head scarves, and she calls it ukhosikgadi. Ukhosikgadi, now people all far from Joburg say, hey, I need a satin bonnet to sleep with. Something as simple as that. Like, we just need to now start to have entrepreneurial skills in order to make it. So look at the gap in the market. I think the AY department, for example, needs to have more of those things where we actually encourage our youth to say, hey, you've got this. You know, you don't need to say bus to someone. You can make something out of your situation and have an income and not wait for checkers to call you back. You can start with. Yeah, so we've had those two scenarios where it's either they get the job or they get inspiration to start something.
Yeah, do something on your own, start a business if you can, sell cakes or something. So yeah, and that's actually like a very dope answer, because that's what's needed, to uplift our community. Sometimes there are no jobs. You are the person that need to actually start creating those jobs. So yeah, that's a very, very valid point. So now, what do you say to people that say, hey, I want to pop champagne and still pray? Like, do we as young people have room to kind of like alter our belief system?
You're putting me in trouble.
I mean,
no, I am going to further say why I'm saying that, because it's also a thing I have been thinking about, and I think maybe I should do more research about it. So I'm going to speak from an unresearched point of view. I want to do that disclaimer that when I'm speaking, I'm not speaking as an all-knowing, all-powerful, all whatever. No, this is now from a limited worldview perspective, and I might just be, I might just be wrong. And I'm also not speaking on behalf of the Seventh-day Adventist Church at this point in time. I'm speaking as Tataiso Mafora-Malakalaka, who is an employee of the Adventist Church, so I need to be careful. But I'm also just, I'm going
I love
to
the
put
disclaimer. I love the disclaimer. You want to make it very clear.
Yes, indeed. So I think right now with biblical research of the ancient times and etc., and this is the argument that youth are using, is that, number one, Jesus turned water into wine, and
Yes.
that and it wasn't, and the person who was serving wine said you served the best at the end of the day, and wine was wine, like it wasn't juice back in those days. So to mean that if there was wine during the day, this one was the best from the selection of the fermented drinks. There's also that thing of, is it Paul who says somebody had a stomach ache and was like, drink a little wine to soothe your stomach. So we do get those arguments, and we can't wish those texts away, because what our predecessors, we also used to ask those questions in our Bible classes in my local church in Klerksdorp. Oh yeah, I'm from Klerksdorp, the Northwest Province. So in Klerksdorp SDA Church, we used to ask these questions Sabbath afternoons when we have talks. And they'd say, no, Jesus made juice. But, you study and you realize that, no, it wasn't juice. Wine was wine. So, and another thing is that because there were no refrigerators or whatever, usually you would end up, if you're going to have a long journey and you did have whatever, it would mainly be wine and not our liquid fruit and stuff with our preservatives these days. So we've got that perspective, but then we also then have the fact that in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, as a Seventh-day Adventist member that has been baptized, even on your baptismal day, there are certain fundamental beliefs that you espouse to, or there's a vow and you raise up your hand. And some of the vows, you do mention that you will stay away from narcotics. I did this like 2 weeks ago for a baptism, so that's why it's like clear in my mind. You'll stay away from narcotics, drugs, and all of that, alcoholic substances, etc. So and that is from just a health and temperance point of view, that we all know, like, whether even medical research has shown that the disadvantage of consuming alcohol. So for that whole, my body is the temple of the Lord, and etc., I think in our day and age that still stands. However, whether it will mess up your relationship with Christ, I'm going to say that I don't think so. There's no theological reference that I can say you will be kicked out or something like that. It's like those people who say, because you eat meat, you're not making it to heaven. You can't make statements like that. That's the best that I can do for now. I still need further research.
Well, well said, and I obviously, respect your position to say, these are your thoughts and not necessarily, of the church. And, and those are like the topics that young people are struggling with, being a believer, but there's still a social life, especially now, the age that we are in as young people. I'm going to say in South Africa, because our parents, I think, the previous generation didn't sin as much because they just didn't have the means and the access, especially like Black folk, they didn't have the money or access to opportunities that, we young Blacks have. So, they couldn't turn up back in the day because there wasn't a club around the corner. There wasn't this, there wasn't that, But for us, it's a different story. So it's an interesting thing that I always think about from time to time. Like, okay, cool. I wonder if my parents were young during this time, if they would have turned out the way that they are now, But anyway, that's another story for another day. I also wanted to ask you, like, right now, this is the second last question, by the way. Right now, we see a lot of pastors trending on media, right? For especially male pastors. I haven't seen female pastors for now. Trending for abusing their power, whether it's men are abusing their power on the congregants who are women, or the pastors just using people for financial gain, and we even see some of them getting arrested and so forth. And I just thought it's interesting, like, what do you make of those topics, because it makes people view church in general differently.
All right.
Is it too much?
There's a recent one that is trending, so I'm just laughing at that one.
Yeah.
However, so are you asking what are my thoughts on the abuse of power specifically?
Abuse of power in church. That's my question.
Yeah.
Yes.
What are my thoughts on it?
Yes.
Is it a real thing?
Yes.
Is
like I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I just want to hear what you think. I don't want to ask you, for example, do you think that male pastors are abusing girls? I just want to hear just broad yeah.
Well, I used to underestimate the power that I even have as a female pastor. However, I realized that I'm going to start from myself and then move further. I have realized that I have received a lot of respect before I even proved that I'm worthy of that respect. I would get to a place, or I would be instructed that you are having a new placement and you need to move to Klerksdorp. And when I arrived there, the first thing they say is, Dumela Mruti Marona. If we're having a multicultural audience, then it would say, good morning, my pastor, our mother. And I remember being told those words as a 24-year-old, literally 24 years old. And you are being greeted like that with so much respect by a person who's 50 plus. You sit in a meeting and they are talking about a church building, and they're building this church. and the budget is something million. You've never had that in your account, for example, and you're a 24-year-old and you just got to work. I mean, he's just assigned this church. And they will talk about everything. You've never built a house, you have never built a mukuku, But when they have to finalize, all right, we brought this, this is the budget. But at the end of the day, Pastor, what do you think? Because at the end of the day, we will take your opinion. So you understand that the smallest things, you are given so much power. And you need to be responsible. You need to respect the people that are giving you that respect. And it's so unfortunate that people do. I mean, because these stories have made headlines, they are proof that this power and respect that members are giving to pastors does get abused. And another thing is that power is also very attractive. Power is also attractive. So sometimes people think they can get away with being perverts because there are some women who, or some members, because I also get guys who will come to me and in my DMs and etc. Even though they can see I'm a pastor, but they want to have lunch with you or whatever, and you can see that, okay, this is not lunch for spiritual prophecy. This is something else, Yeah. And so knowing that power is attractive, you need to be able to have boundaries. And instead of having boundaries, others take it for granted that everyone is attracted to them, and sometimes it's not. And they take the most vulnerable, unfortunately, in society, the younger ones, and they do abuse their power. And we will not condone it. I will not condone even a family member to get away with stuff like that. So with colleagues, I don't tolerate. I don't tolerate such. And I believe that the church takes a sanitized approach. It's too sanitized. You can't report a pastor to another pastor who's their buddy. They just get a little slap on their wrist. Others are sexual violences, serious stuff, like Omotoso cases, for example. And if you're going to give such a case to your church elder, to give it to the conference president, no, you take these offenses seriously. It's a criminal offense. Can it be taken to the police station? Because all we are going to do is just rebaptize that person and then they're back on the pulpit again or whatever. So I believe that approach is too sanitized. We can't tolerate nonsense. We can't tolerate nonsense. So I'm really of the view that we need to say first step, police station, sexual harassment, police station, whatever. Even if he took your money, etc., small claims court, depending on the amount of money. Hey, get justice.
Wow, thank you so much for that. This app just told me that we're running out of time. I didn't even know it could do that. Yeah. So I don't want it to cut us off. Briefly, do you have anything that you just want to put out there to anybody that's watching this interview?
What would I want? Okay, which specific audience? Right now I'm a women's ministries leader. When some people say, do you want to say something? Am I saying it to the general public? Am I saying it to a young woman watching this? And
it could just be anything, as simple as, guys, pray every day. The devil is strong these days, or advice on, how to make it. I don't know. I just don't like cutting the interview abruptly like that, because maybe there's something that you might want to say.
Okay.
No pressure though.
No pressure at all. I'm going to say what resonates with me. I'm for female leadership. I'm going to be that. I am for female leadership. And I believe that the voices of women shouldn't be suppressed in the church or in society. Whether you are in boards or whatever, please incorporate us as women. And this would need another biblical discussion. However, uh, I believe there are a lot of things that still need to be debunked in the church in terms of God's view of women and the fact and the role that they play in society, and that we are called for so much more than what antiquity has said about us. And yeah, I am a living proof example that the Holy Spirit speaks to women and works through us. And there's a lot of work that can be done, is done, and still can, yeah, and will continue to be done. So yeah, all the best to everyone. Yeah, God bless you all. Keep on striving. Yeah, you don't need to say bus to anyone. I love that one. You don't need to say bus to anyone. Continue to strive. Like
Yeah,
excellence.
well said. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for your time, man. I think a lot of people will appreciate this content.
All right, cool.